The message came at 0347 hours, interrupting a poker game in the mess hall of the GSS Relentless. Admiral Rosa Mendez was winning. She had 3 kings and a terrible poker face, but her crew let her win anyway. They loved her too much to take her money. She was halfway through a joke about a priest and an engineer when her communications officer burst through the door. "Admiral, you need to see this." The poker chips stayed on the table. Everyone followed her to the bridge. Outside the viewport, the stars had changed. Where there had been empty space, now there were ships. Hundreds of them. 412, to be exact. The computer counted them twice to make sure. The Draker hegemony had arrived. Rosa had heard stories about the Draker. Everyone in the galaxy had. They were the monsters that parents used to scare children into behaving. They had conquered 17 species. They had turned entire planets into glass. They had never lost a war in 3,000 years of conquest. And now they surrounded her single battlecruiser like wolves around a wounded deer. The main screen flickered. A face appeared. It was reptilian, covered in dark green scales, with eyes like yellow fire. Supreme Commander Grathal of the Draker hegemony looked at Rosa the way a boot looks at an insect. "Human vessel," he said. His voice was deep and cold. "You will relay this message to your species." Rosa said nothing. She just watched. The Draker hegemony claims dominion over all human territories. You will surrender your colonies. You will disband your military forces. You will accept our rule. You have 12 standard hours to comply. He paused. His yellow eyes narrowed. "If you refuse, we will destroy your civilization. We will burn your worlds. We will erase your species from existence. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The screen went dark. Silence filled the bridge. Rosa could hear her own heartbeat. She could hear her crew breathing. 2,000 souls on this ship, and every single one of them was looking at her. She thought about her daughter Anna, back on Earth. She thought about the colony on New Kansas where her brother grew wheat. She thought about every human who had ever lived and died and loved and fought. Then she started laughing. It began as a small chuckle. Then it grew. Her shoulders shook. Tears formed in her eyes. She laughed until she had to hold on to her command chair for support. Someone behind her snorted. Then another officer giggled. Within 30 seconds, the entire bridge was roaring with laughter. The weapons officer was bent over his console. The navigator had tears streaming down her face. Even the ship's cook, who had no business being on the bridge, was howling. The communications officer wiped his eyes. "Admiral, what should I tell them?" Rosa caught her breath. She straightened her uniform. She looked at the 400 warships surrounding her vessel. "Tell them no." The officer blinked. "Just no. Just no." The message was sent. 1 word. 2 letters. The shortest diplomatic response in human history. 3 minutes later, Grathal's face reappeared on screen. His scales had changed color slightly. Rosa had studied enough alien biology to recognize confusion when she saw it. "Human commander," he said slowly. "I do not think you understood. We have 400 warships. You have 1. Your species has perhaps 200 vessels total. We have conquered civilizations that were ancient when your ancestors were still living in caves. Surrender is your only option for survival." Rosa smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "I understood perfectly," she said. "My answer is still no." "Then you choose extinction." "Maybe. But here's the thing about humans, Commander. We don't really do surrender. It's not in our nature. We've been fighting each other for 200,000 years. We survived ice ages, plagues, asteroids, and ourselves. We clawed our way out of the mud and into the stars with nothing but stubbornness and spite." She leaned forward. "So you can take your ultimatum and your 400 ships and your threats of extinction, and you can shove them somewhere uncomfortable. Because my answer today is no. My answer tomorrow will be no. And if you glass every planet we own, the last human alive will still be telling you no with their dying breath." Grathal stared at her. For 3,000 years, species had begged for mercy when he made this speech. They had surrendered. They had wept. They had offered anything to survive. No one had ever laughed at him. "You are insane," he said. "Probably," Rosa agreed. "But we're also really good at fighting. So if you want our surrender, you're going to have to come over here and take it." She killed the transmission. Her crew was still grinning. Fear and excitement mixed together in their eyes. They knew the odds. They knew what was coming. And somehow, impossibly, they were ready for it. Rosa turned to her weapons officer. Power up everything we've got. Already done, Admiral. She looked out at the Draker fleet. 400 ships. Thousands of guns. Enough firepower to crack a moon in half. Well then, she said quietly. Let's show these lizards how humans say hello. The Relentless surged forward, straight into the heart of the enemy formation. And somewhere in the void of space, the galaxy held its breath. 12 billion beings across 300 worlds watched the same footage at the same moment at a single human ship, burning and broken, flying directly into a wall of enemy fire. Not running, not surrendering. Attacking. On the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Lyra Okonkwo sat perfectly still as representatives from 40 species screamed at her. They called her people crazy. They called them suicidal. They begged her to surrender before it was too late. She waited until they finished. Then she smiled. Gentlemen, she said calmly, I appreciate your concern, but humanity has made its decision. The Kelthani ambassador, a tall being with silver skin and 3 eyes, slammed his hand on the table. You don't understand. The Draker destroyed my empire in 6 days. 6 days. We had 1,000 ships. We had technology you haven't even dreamed of. And they erased us like we were nothing. I know, Lyra said. I've read the history. Then what? The Muroth delegate, whose species now existed only as refugees, spread his 4 arms in despair. Why throw away your civilization? The Draker will accept your surrender. They will make you slaves? Yes, but you will survive. Your children will live. Isn't that worth something? Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Her dark eyes were kind but firm. Let me tell you something about humans, she said. About 2,000 years ago, a small group of our warriors faced an army of over 100,000. They knew they would die. They knew they couldn't win. Do you know what they did? The council was silent. They stayed. 300 men against an empire. They fought for 3 days. They killed thousands before they fell. And when it was over, their sacrifice inspired their entire nation to rise up and defeat that empire forever. She stood up slowly. We have been fighting since before we could write. We have survived ice that covered our world. We have survived plagues that killed half our population. We have survived wars that burned our cities to ash. And every single time, we got back up. Her voice grew stronger. The Draker think they know war. They think they understand conquest. But they have never faced a species that treats combat like a sport. They have never fought people who run toward explosions instead of away from them. They have never encountered a civilization where our children play games about killing each other for fun. The Kelthani ambassador shook his head. You're describing madness. Maybe, Lyra admitted. But it's kept us alive for 200,000 years. And it will keep us alive now. Far across the galaxy, in a dark room filled with screens, a young Draker named Seth read the same reports for the 100th time. He was an intelligence officer. His job was to understand enemy species, to find their weaknesses, to predict their behavior. He had done this for 30 conquered civilizations. Humans terrified him. The files were endless. Humans had invented thousands of ways to kill each other. They had fought wars over invisible things they called ideas. They had created weapons that could destroy their entire planet and then built more of them. They had sports where they gave each other brain damage for entertainment. But the most disturbing thing was what they did when facing certain death. Normal species surrendered. Normal species calculated odds and made logical decisions. Normal species wanted to survive. Humans charged. They had a word for it. Last stand. They had hundreds of stories celebrating people who knew they would die and chose to fight anyway. Not because they could win, just because surrender was worse than death. Seth had watched the footage of the human ship attacking his fleet. He had seen the communications log. They had been laughing that he pulled up more files. A human city called Stalingrad, where millions died rather than retreat. A beach called Normandy, where soldiers ran into machine gun fire because someone told them to. A mountain called Masada, where 900 humans killed themselves rather than become slaves. This was not a species that could be conquered. This was a species that would burn the galaxy down before accepting defeat. His claws trembled as he began writing a message to his clutch brother in the High Council. We have made a terrible mistake, he wrote. The humans are not like the others. They do not fear death. They do not calculate survival. They fight because fighting is who they are. He paused, trying to find the right words. We have poked a nest of creatures who think war is a game. and now we must play by their rules. I do not think we will enjoy it." He sent the message. On his screen, the battle was ending. The human ship had been destroyed, but not before taking 23 Draker vessels with it. One ship, 23 kills. The Supreme Commander was already declaring victory. He didn't understand what Seth understood. That ship was just the greeting. The real humans hadn't even arrived yet, and somewhere in the void, humanity was building ships, training soldiers, and sharpening knives. Not because they thought they could win, because they refused to lose. The war had only just begun. The explosion tore through the hull at 17 minutes past midnight. Captain Deshi Abra didn't flinch. He had been expecting it. The Relentless was dying around him, bleeding atmosphere and fire into the void, but she wasn't dead yet. And neither were his Marines. "Breach in Sector 7, someone shouted. "I heard it," Deshi replied. He checked his rifle one more time. "That means they're boarding us." "Good." I was getting bored. Around him, 50 Marines in powered armor prepared for close combat. They had trained for this their entire careers, fighting in tight corridors, hand to hand. The kind of war that didn't happen in space anymore. The Draker had never needed to learn it. They conquered from orbit. They burned planets from a safe distance. They had energy weapons that could vaporize steel from a kilometer away. They had never fought in a hallway. "Remember," Deshi said as the airlock began to glow red from enemy cutters. "These lizards have been winning wars for 3,000 years. They've never met anyone crazy enough to get close. So let's introduce ourselves." The airlock exploded inward. Draker soldiers poured through, their scales gleaming, their weapons raised. They expected terrified humans cowering behind barricades. Instead, they found Deshi Abra running directly at them, laughing. "Surprise!" he screamed, and crashed into the first Draker like a freight train. The corridor became chaos. Human Marines slammed into alien warriors at point-blank range. Rifles became clubs. Fists met scales. The Draker tried to aim their weapons, but humans were everywhere, too close to target, too fast to track. That a Draker commander shouted orders in his own language. "Fall back. Create distance. Use superior firepower," but the humans wouldn't let them. Deshi grabbed a Draker soldier by the throat and threw him into two others. Behind him, a Marine named Santos was wrestling a warrior twice her size, somehow winning through pure fury. Corporal Webb had lost his weapon and was using a Draker rifle as a baseball bat. "This is insane," Webb shouted gleefully. "I love it." The Draker broke. They actually turned and ran from the tiny human force. 3,000 years of conquest, and they retreated from 50 screaming primates. Deshi's comm crackled. Admiral Mendez's voice came through, strained but alive. "Captain, status report." "We're winning, Admiral." "Sort of. What about the ship?" "She's done, Deshi. 10 minutes, maybe less. But we've taken 23 of their ships with us. Not bad for a welcome party." Deshi looked at his surviving Marines. 31 left. 31 humans on a dying ship surrounded by 400 enemies. "Admiral, permission to do something stupid." A pause, then a tired laugh. "Granted. Always granted. We're going to board their command ship. With 30 Marines." 31, ma'am. "And yes." Another pause. "Give them hell, Captain." The boarding pods were small. They were designed for emergencies, not assaults. But they would reach the Draker flagship in 47 seconds if launched at full speed. 47 seconds of being a target. Deshi didn't care. His Marines piled into the pods. They were bleeding, exhausted, and outnumbered 1,000 to 1. They were also grinning like children on a holiday. "Anyone scared?" Deshi asked. "Terrified," someone admitted. "Me too. Isn't it wonderful?" The pods launched. Draker gunners tried to track them. Point defense systems opened fire. Space became a storm of energy beams and explosions. Point 3 pods were destroyed instantly. 20 Marines gone in a flash of light. The other two kept going. Deshi's pod slammed into the Draker flagship's hull hard enough to knock him off his feet. The drill nose screamed as it cut through alien metal. Then they were through, tumbling into the enemy ship with 11 Marines left. 11 humans. 50,000 Draker. "Well," Deshi said, picking himself up, "this is going to be interesting." They fought for 6 hours. 6 hours of corridor warfare. 6 hours of ambushes and last stands and desperate charges. 6 hours of teaching the Draker what humans could do when they had nothing left to lose. They didn't win. Of course they didn't win. 11 humans couldn't capture a flagship, but they killed 400 Draker warriors. They destroyed the ship's main engines. They uploaded a virus into the navigation computer that would take weeks to purge, and they broadcast everything. Every species in the galaxy watched 11 humans hold a corridor against wave after wave of enemies. They watched Deshi Abra, wounded in 7 places, stand over his last surviving Marine and keep fighting until his ammunition ran out. They watched him throw his empty rifle at a Draker and charge with nothing but his fists. He went down eventually. They all did. But by then, the Relentless had already sent its final message to Earth. "We held them," Admiral Mendez said in the recording. "One ship, 2,000 humans. We made them pay for every inch. Now it's your turn." She was smiling in the video. Bleeding, dying, but smiling. "Show them what we're made of." The video ended, and across human space, a billion voices answered. Old Billy Harper hadn't fired a rifle in 40 years. He was 73 years old. His knees hurt. His eyes weren't what they used to be. He had been a farmer on New Kansas for 5 decades, growing wheat that fed 3 colony worlds. Now he was lying in a ditch with a hunting rifle, watching Draker soldiers march through his fields. "They're burning the silos," his granddaughter whispered beside him. She was 19, scared, and holding a shotgun she barely knew how to use. "I can see that, Penny. What do we do?" Billy watched the aliens for a long moment. They moved in perfect formation. Their weapons could punch through tank armor. Their shields could stop anything short of a missile. He had a rifle that was older than Penny and a box of ammunition he bought for hunting deer. "We make them pay for every stalk of wheat." He said 3 weeks had passed since the Relentless fell. 3 weeks since the Draker invasion began. 3 weeks of reports that made no sense to alien commanders. Human colonies didn't surrender. They didn't evacuate. They didn't negotiate. They fortified. Every city became a fortress. Every building became a bunker. Civilians who had never held weapons in their lives suddenly became soldiers. Old men like Billy Harper organized militias. Teenagers built bombs from farming chemicals. Children carried messages through tunnels too small for Draker soldiers. The invasion should have taken days. It was taking weeks, and the Draker were paying in blood for every kilometer that on New Kansas alone. They had lost 600 soldiers to farmers with improvised weapons. Supreme Commander Grathal could not understand it. "They have no military training," he growled at his advisors. "They have no advanced weapons. They have no chance of victory. Why won't they surrender?" Nobody had an answer. Meanwhile, in a dark room on Draker Prime, Seth continued his research. He had filled 17 data tablets with notes. Human history, human psychology, human warfare. The more he learned, the more horrified he became. The humans had a concept they called total war. It meant mobilizing every resource, every person, every piece of their civilization for combat. Other species considered it barbaric. Humans considered it normal. They had another concept called partisan warfare. It meant that even when you conquered their armies, their civilians kept fighting. They hid in forests and cities and mountains. They struck at night and vanished. They could keep fighting for generations. The Draker had conquered species before. Those species accepted defeat when their militaries were destroyed. Humans didn't have a separate military. Every human was a potential soldier. Every home was a potential fortress. Every citizen was a potential enemy. How do you conquer a species where surrender doesn't exist? Seth's claws trembled as he wrote another message to the High Council. "We are not fighting an army," he wrote. "We are fighting a civilization. Every human, from their oldest elder to their youngest child, is willing to die rather than submit. Our casualties are already higher than projected. They will continue to rise. We cannot win through force alone." Nobody listened to him. They never did. 300 light years away, Fleet Admiral Kwame Asani stood on the bridge of humanity's newest warship and looked at the stars. 200 ships behind him. Everything humanity could build, buy, borrow, or steal in 3 weeks of desperate work. Cargo haulers with guns welded to their hulls. Civilian yachts fitted with missile racks. Ancient museum ships dragged out of retirement. Against them stood the Draker Armada. 2,000 warships. The most powerful fleet ever assembled. "Admiral," his executive officer said quietly, "the math doesn't work." "I know. We're outnumbered 10 to 1. I know. They have better weapons, better shields, better everything. Kwame smiled. It was the same smile Rosa Mendez had worn before her death. Did you know, he said conversationally, that humans once fought a war with sticks and stones against an empire with guns? Sir, we lost that war. Badly. The empire killed millions of us, enslaved the rest. But we kept fighting. And eventually, that empire fell apart. The guns rusted. The soldiers went home. And the people with sticks and stones inherited the earth. He turned to face his crew. The Draker have better weapons. But we have something they don't. We have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. So today, we're going to fly into that fleet and show them what 10-to-1 odds look like from the other side. His communications officer was crying. His weapons officer was praying. His helmsman was gripping the controls so hard his knuckles were white. They were all terrified. They were all ready. Admiral, someone asked, what if we die? Kwame laughed. Then we die? But we're going to take so many of them with us that their grandchildren will remember our names. He raised his hand. All ships. Full speed ahead. And someone play some music. If we're going to die today, we're going to die dancing. The fleet surged forward into the waiting guns. And against all logic, against all reason, against all hope, they were smiling. The first Draker soldier surrendered on the 200th day of the war. His name was Reth, and he walked out of a burning bunker with his claws raised and tears in his eyes. The human soldiers who found him didn't know what to do. Nobody had ever seen a Draker surrender before. It took 3 hours to convince them he wasn't a trap. Within a month, 2,000 more followed. The Draker hegemony was breaking. Seth read the reports in silence. Ship losses, 340 vessels destroyed. Ground casualties, 47,000 soldiers dead. Morale, collapsing. The humans had lost 89 ships. They had built 200 more. Every time the Draker destroyed a human shipyard, 2 more appeared. Every time they conquered a colony, the civilians kept fighting. Every time they declared victory, the humans laughed and attacked again. It was impossible. It defied everything Seth knew about warfare. And now, Supreme Commander Grathal was about to make the worst decision in Draker history. Extermination Protocol, Grathal announced to the War Council. His scales had turned dark with rage. 30 human planets. Simultaneous bombardment. We will glass their worlds and end this war today. Seth stood up so fast his chair fell over. Commander, this is madness. Sit down, intelligence officer. This strategy failed against the Kelthani. They surrendered before we finished. Humans won't surrender. You'll just make them angrier. Then we will kill them all. You can't kill them all. There are 20 billion humans across 100 worlds. You would need to glass every single planet, kill every single human, destroy every single ship. It would take years. Decades. Grathal's yellow eyes burned with fury. Then it will take years. I will not be humiliated by these primitives. The order went out. 30 bombardment fleets. 30 planets. Enough firepower to turn worlds into ash. The attacks began at dawn, local time, across human space. They failed within hours on the colony of New Houston. 3 civilian transport ships flew directly into the bombardment fleet's firing line. They had no weapons. They had no shields. They were just transport ships filled with volunteers. They used their own bodies as shields. The Draker guns tore them apart instantly. But the debris cloud blocked targeting sensors for 73 seconds. 73 seconds was enough time for human warships to arrive. The bombardment fleet was destroyed. On every targeted world, the same thing happened. Civilian ships, passenger liners, cargo haulers, even private yachts flew into the line of fire. Thousands of humans died by minutes. Those minutes were enough. Seth watched the reports come in and felt something he had never felt before. Fear. Not fear of humans. Fear of what his own people had become. The Draker had ruled through terror for 3,000 years. They had believed terror was the ultimate weapon. But terror only works if your enemy fears death. Humans didn't fear death. They feared something else entirely. They feared living as slaves. And they would do anything, sacrifice anything, give everything to avoid that fate. The Coral Nebula. Admiral Kwame Asani sprung his trap. The main Draker armada had been chasing his fleet for 3 days. They thought the humans were running. They thought the humans were afraid. They were wrong. Kwame had been leading them into a minefield. 300,000 mines, hidden in the nebula's dust. The Draker flew directly into them at full speed. The explosions turned space into a second sun. 800 Draker ships died in 4 hours. The greatest naval disaster in their history. And for the first time ever, Draker soldiers began to surrender in large numbers. Not because they had given up, because they finally understood they couldn't win. Seth didn't wait for permission. He didn't ask for approval. He walked into the communications center, pushed aside the officers on duty, and broadcast a message on every Draker frequency. "This is Intelligence Officer Seth," he said. "I am ordering all Draker forces to cease hostilities immediately. We are requesting peace negotiations with the human government." Grathol burst into the room seconds later, scales red with rage. "You have no authority to make that order." "No," Seth agreed. "But I have this." Guards poured through the door. Not Grathol's guards. Seth's guards. Officers who had read his reports. Officers who knew the truth. "Supreme Commander Grathol," Seth said quietly, "you are relieved of duty. This is mutiny. This is treason. This is survival. We cannot win this war. We can only choose how we lose it." Grathol's eyes burned. "The hardliner fleet has already launched. 400 ships, headed for Earth. You cannot stop them." Seth felt his heart freeze. "What have you done? What needed to be done? If the Draker must fall, we will take humanity with us." Seth looked at the tactical display. 400 ships, already in hyperspace. 48 hours from Earth that he had stopped the war, but he might have been too late to stop the genocide. Earth had never looked more beautiful than it did surrounded by fire. Captain Ana Mendez watched the Draker hardliner fleet drop out of hyperspace. 400 warships, their guns already charging. They had come to burn her homeworld. They had come to finish what the war had started. They had come to the wrong planet. Ana was 32 years old. She had her mother's smile and her mother's stubbornness. She also had command of the GSS Relentless II, named after the ship that started everything. Around her, humanity's home defense fleet spread across the sky like a wall of steel. Military cruisers, armed civilian ships, orbital stations that had undocked from their moorings to serve as weapons platforms. Mining vessels with their drills converted to rams, everything that could fly, everything that could fight. "Captain," her sensors officer called out, "enemy fleet is demanding our surrender." Ana laughed. It was her mother's laugh. "Put them on screen." The Draker commander appeared. His scales were dark with determination. His eyes held the desperate fire of a true believer. "Human vessel," he said, "your fleet is outnumbered. Your planet is defenseless. Surrender now, and we will show mercy to your civilian population." Ana smiled. "Did you know," she said conversationally, "that my mother died on the first day of this war?" The Draker commander said nothing. "She was on the Relentless, the ship you destroyed with 400 ships. Do you know what her last words were?" "Silence." She said, "That was just the welcome committee." Ana leaned forward. "So let me tell you what my words are going to be. Come and take it. Come and take our planet. Come and take our homes. Come and take our future. And see what happens when you try." She killed the transmission. "All ships," she announced on the fleet channel. "This is Captain Mendez. Today, we defend Earth. Today, we show these invaders what humans are made of. And today, we finish what my mother started." She paused. "They laughed at us when this war began. They called us primitive. They called us weak. They said we would surrender or die." Her voice grew stronger. "Well, we didn't surrender. And we're not dead yet. So let's show them the punchline." The fleet roared forward. The battle lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of chaos and fire and destruction. Human ships flew directly into enemy formations. They rammed Draker cruisers with cargo haulers. They launched missiles at point-blank range and flew through the explosions, and they laughed. The communications channels were full of it. Jokes cracked over the sound of explosions. Marines singing war songs as they boarded enemy vessels. Pilots cheering as they took impossible shots. The Draker commander watched his fleet dying around him and finally understood. "Why?" he transmitted to Ana Mendez. His voice was broken. "Why do you fight like this? You could have surrendered. You could have lived as subjects. Why choose death?" Ana's ship was burning. Half her crew was dead. She had a wound in her side that was slowly killing her. She was still smiling. "You've got it backwards," she said. "Surrender isn't living. And this isn't dying. This is living at full volume." The last Draker ship exploded 3 hours later. Not a single enemy vessel escaped. 2 weeks later, Ambassador Lyra Okonkwo sat across from Seth at the peace negotiations. The galaxy watched. Species that had been slaves for centuries held their breath. "We do not demand your surrender," Lyra said. Seth blinked, all 6 of his eyes. "You don't?" "No. We're offering alliance." The silence stretched for a long moment. "I don't understand," Seth admitted. "We invaded your worlds. We killed your people. We tried to destroy your civilization." "Yes. Why would you ally with us?" Lyra smiled. It was a gentle smile, but there was something dangerous behind it. "Because we're not interested in conquest. We never were. We just wanted to be left alone. But now that everyone knows what we can do, we have a choice. We can rule through fear like you did. Or we can try something different." She leaned forward. "The galaxy has been ruled by fear for too long. Species conquering species. The strong crushing the weak. We want to change that. And the best way to change it is to show that former enemies can become friends." Seth stared at her for a long time. "Your species is truly strange," he said finally. "We know. The treaty was signed that day. The news spread across 1,000 worlds. The Draker hegemony was no more. In its place was something new. Something unprecedented. Partnership. The victory celebration. A Draker warrior sat next to a human marine. They had been trying to kill each other 6 months ago. Now they were sharing drinks. "I must ask," the Draker said slowly. "How do you humans stay so calm in battle? You face death without fear. It is unnatural." The marine laughed and took a long drink. "Calm. Brother, we're terrified every time. Every single fight. I think I'm going to die." "Then how do you keep fighting?" The marine grinned. "Because being scared is hilarious. Because the universe is trying to kill us, and we're still here. Because every moment we survive is a joke we're playing on death itself." He raised his glass. "We laugh because the alternative is crying. And humans? We'd rather die laughing." Somewhere in the void, the stars kept burning, and humanity kept laughing.